All right, all right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Breakfast with the Brand. I am your host, Junior Ray Frederick, and you are now tuning in into the number one podcast in the world for entrepreneurs and leaders who want to elevate their brand leadership. If you just come in, I want you to do two things. Number one, put where you're calling in from, and also number two, put some flames in the chat. I have with me the king of branding himself, Mr. Shaan Rais. Shaan, what's up? How you doing?
No complaints at all. Honestly, this is one of those episodes that this platform was made for, right, guys? I want you to understand that we're going to move a little bit. We're going to move some chess pieces on this podcast specifically. On this episode, we're going to strategically move a couple of chess pieces towards a bigger issue, right? So I want you to think. Very important. I want you to think as you build your business, as you build your brand, why are you doing it? What issues in the world would you like to address on the back end? Like why you started in the beginning and where you're trying to go with it, why you're doing it. Right. So just bear with us because this is going to be a real deep dive into some crucial issues. That's how I'm doing, Mr. That's how I'm doing, Junior. That's how I'm doing. You know what I mean? Like I'm excited. I'm excited about this one.
Shaan, hold on. Now, before we get into that, let me just say phenomenal morning to everybody coming in. I see we have Jasmine. I see we have Amal. We have some people on Facebook, LinkedIn. So we have Florida. What is that? Is that Alaska? I see Alaska in the building. Kemi.
Come on.
Kemi from Alaska.
Good morning to Alaska.
Yes, phenomenal morning.
Is it hot over there? What's the degrees like? I don't know. What's the temperature like? I hear they have 6-month winters and 6-month summers, like 6 months of light and 6 months of dark. Is that true? Put it in the chat if that's true, because I've heard there's 6 months light, 6 months dark over there.
Wow. That's amazing. Shaan, I noticed something different. I noticed your I couldn't help but notice your background is a little different. So are you?
Oh yes. Yes, so we are on the move. Breakfast with the Brand is on the move. We are mobile, right? We are mobile, and we're going to get some things in. We're going to do we got some speaking going on. We also got some pictures taking place. We got a whole different, it's a lot of action with the brand right now. So just bear with us. The background should be switching a little bit, but we'll be okay. If you guys are so inclined, I don't know, Junior, you might want to put it in the chat. Tomorrow evening, it's going to be an even different background. So just stick with us.
Yes, sir. And by the way, I'll tell you something. I get excited when I see background shifts. So how many of you guys get excited when you see background shifts? Put a number 1 in the chat. The brand, the brand is always moving. We're always in different places.
Right. On the move.
Shout out to that's right. On the move. You have to keep moving, right? So quick shout out to Deborah. So Kemi says no. So Shaan, we've just have confirmation. They're not 6 months of light and 6 months of darkness. In Alaska.
Okay. Good stuff. Maybe that was from I think it was from the movie Insomnia that kind of highlighted that. Yes. Movement means money. That's right.
All right. Yes, sir. All right. So Shaan, I wanna highlight. Tomorrow, since you just mentioned it, tomorrow on the Leadership Leverage community at 7. Listen, guys, this is going to be super exclusive. It will not be live. So that means you have to register and come on the inside. It will no longer be live. It's going to be super exclusive for high performers only. So with that being said, we're gonna put the link somewhere in the comments during this presentation. I wanna talk a little bit about what's coming next after the break, or in fact
Oh
who's
yeah,
coming
brother.
next. I want you to give the people a preview of what they're about to experience through
All
our
right.
very, very special guest.
No problem. No problem. We always talk about putting meaningfulness before money, putting impact before income, putting people and purpose ahead of profit, right? And value before the valuation. Everybody knows I'm just a guy from Harlem who grew up in the late 80s, early 90s. I tell you about the mistakes that were made and I tell you about the situations, but you already know them, right? So what we're going to have is we're going to have an expert who has the education, the experience, and the expertise to speak to this issue that takes place within the inner cities and underprivileged populations, right? This is one of the reasons why I created this platform to build a platform where people could speak to much more deeper societal issues and things that plague not only this country but the entire world. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to that break and bring on somebody that I've known for quite some time.
Let's go.
All right. All right. Very good. So let's waste no time. Let's waste no time, Junior. I'm ready for Cello to come on out. Let's bring out Cello, guys. Welcome, Mr. Leonard Chello Webb. Welcome, brother. Welcome to Breakfast with the Brand.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's amazing what you're doing. From the first time we met, we had a connection, and it's just amazing to see what you're doing.
Thank you, brother. Thank you so much. Right. So, and I remember that. That was about what, almost 4 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, 2018.
Yeah, 2018. Wow. How's the world changed since then?
Oh,
The world has changed dramatically, hasn't it?
yeah, so much.
Yes, yes. As well as, our brands, businesses, and the things that we've been doing, right? So I always tell people that come through my community as an entrepreneur, the reason why you're here or the reason why you think you're here is not why you're here. Right. So the reason why you think you're here is not why you're here. And I can remember when we met, you were going through the speaking development and you were a speaker. And now you've kind of formally moved into the training space. So let's dive in lightly on that first. Before we even go into what you do, let's talk about the who. Introduce yourself to the phenomenal community that is watching right now. What is your name? What do you do? And why do you do it?
Good morning, everybody. My thing is ending the school to prison pipeline. And for you guys that don't know what that is, it's not a metaphor. People always say, that's a metaphor? And it's not. It's a real thing from my experience. It's policies and procedures in place in our school systems that increase the likelihood of our young people to go to prison rather than college or careers after high school. And I do that because of my own experiences of getting in trouble as a youth, but also I spent 27 years in corrections where I saw young men coming to prison. And at the same time, I was working at a university as an adjunct professor, and I saw the same young men coming into my classroom that were entering my office at the prison. And I immediately realized that the men that were entering my office were just as smart, just as intelligent, just as driven. There were just things in place in a lot of our inner city schools that made it difficult for them to excel in the classroom.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So I always tell people, now I just want to step back for a moment because I always tell people to choose to do something that you love first. Because mathematically, for every 3 years that you spend on a job, no overtime included, no overtime, just the 8 hour day, 8 times 3 is 24, right? 8 times 3 is 24. So for every for every 3 days that you spend on a job, you spend one entire set of 24 hours on that job, right? So for every 3 years that you spend on a job, you spend one entire year on that job, right? So if you said 27 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you divide 27 by 3, that's 9. So you've basically spent 9 years in prison. Now that's deep, brother. That's deep because you did this by choice. Most people get forced into prison. You chose to go in for 9 years. And let me ask you, what was your driving motivation besides, making money? But I know you can make money anywhere and in multiple different ways. So what was your thought set, right? Your mindset about going into corrections? What was your motivation?
I saw a lot of my family, a lot of my friends enter the system, and I wanted to make a difference. After graduating college, my actual first job was a police officer. And that was just, I had a daughter I wanted to provide, but that didn't work out. I'm not cop material. So
Okay.
that didn't work out. And I got into corrections as a way of making money. But when I got in there, I realized I can make a difference. I'm with these guys. I can be a role model. I'm doing therapy. I understand where they've been and I understand where they can be. So it was, for me, closing the gap between them obviously knowing what they want and the right things to do and actually doing it. And as I closed that gap, I was able to help them not return to prison. And the better I got at it, the more I loved it. It wasn't like going to prison. It was like I'm at home, I'm in the hood with my friends, and we're working on a plan for our life. And every interaction I had was really about that. There was no power struggle between us. There was difficulties because of the work I do, because the environment wasn't, prepared for me, I would say. It wasn't prepared for someone like me. And, prisons are set up in that authoritarian
Okay.
way. And I was more.
Let me ask you this, because you said something about not being cop material. So tell me about not being cop material. What did you mean by that?
Well, when we look at TV shows, I wanted to be Eddie Murphy, Beverly Hills Cop. I wanted to be cool and be that, Miami Vice type detective and stuff. And at the end of the day,
Okay.
save somebody's life. And it wasn't like that. There are a lot of things in place that I didn't agree with. There are a lot of things that I saw that I didn't agree with. And I knew this wouldn't work out for me. So I quit.
Wow. That's huge. That's huge, because I know there's a lot of, now you see, this plays into what I said before we brought you out, right? Putting the meaningfulness before the money and putting the impact over the income, right? There's certain people that are built certain ways where certain lines can't be crossed and certain things can't be asked of them, no matter what, no matter how much money is involved. So that's morals, values, and principles. And I definitely thank you for your sacrifice and your dedication in that space. And then the reallocation of your resources towards the brothers and sisters in the correctional facilities, right? So I know you said, let me just go into this for a moment, because I also tell people that they want to move where their education, experience, and expertise lies. I don't bring people on who don't have the evidence-based background. Nothing that we're going to talk about is theory. Everything we're going to talk about is lived experience. And the people that I bring here also have not only the experience, but the education and the expertise. So tell us a little bit about your educational background so that it can kind of validate what's about to come.
I have a BS in criminology and sociology with a minor in African American studies. And that helped me enter the correction system, the federal prison system, and do drug treatment and do release readiness stuff. And I went back to college after I left the prison system to get a degree in educational leadership. And what's unique about what I do and what's different from what other people do with ending the school to prison pipeline is that most of them are background is in education. My background is in corrections, where I've seen the outcomes. They haven't seen the outcomes. They only talk about the outcomes. They talk about the education. I've seen the outcomes when kids are suspended from school and where they end up, when kids are pushed out of school and moved to alternative schools and juvenile detention centers. I've already seen what happens. Educators only know the theory about what happens to a person after they drop out and end up at.
Wow. Okay. Listen, guys, growing up in Harlem, there's a lot of intersections between what I talk about and what Cello is talking about right now, right? Don't worry about it. We're gonna pick up right from there, right there. I just wanted to speak to the intersections, growing up in Harlem, being kind of pushed out of school by people who weren't really invested in the community, right? There was a different level. It felt almost like policing. Actually, it was almost like policing, maybe a small situation where policing took place on a minor scale, but it was setting you up for something bigger, something more empirical, right? And I want everyone to reference the book, The New Jim Crow, right? Reference the book, The New Jim Crow, for what we're going to talk about when we come back. Mr. B, you can go ahead and take us to a break before we get a little bit deeper into this topic. Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right. All right. So, all right, Cello. So we've got the educational background, we've got the expertise background. Now, just before I go into I have a question for you. I'm going to want you to tell us what you've seen inside, right? I want you to go into what you've seen inside, but I want everybody to understand, like, okay, you say Shaan Rais, you're the brand, right? The brand. What does the brand have to do with the social justice piece, right? Well, the answer is everything. The reason why we started the entrepreneurship piece is to help people who might not have the opportunities to exist in other spaces for whatever reason, whether it's they don't have the taste for it, they don't have the push to be inside of a system 8 hours a day, right? That's another thing, that you might not be paid the right way or treated the right way within certain systems that were not of your own creation. So I'd like to give people an alternative. But there's also the individual who may have made some wrong decisions, who may not have the educational background. I've gotten 2 master's degrees. I'm in 2 doctorates now, but there was a time when I didn't have those things. And I remember how hard it was to crack the ceiling, right? To even enter into an occupation that was adequately compensating people for their time. So I understood what it was, and it was on me. I took it upon myself to create opportunities for those who didn't have them. So that's me on the outside of it. After the fact, maybe after the decision has been made or the wrong decision has been made and some consequences are put there that makes it even harder for a person to build something or do something for themselves. You're on the other end of it at the beginning stages. So I want you to talk a little bit. I want to mute myself, and I want you to talk a little bit to what you've seen on the inside of the prison system, and then what you've seen on the outside in the school system that kind of prepares a person to go from one to the other. What does that look like, Cello?
I want you guys to think about this part, is that if you're arrested for a federal crime and you're in a federal institution, the first week you're there, you're given an educational assessment. And if you have any learning difficulties, we are mandated by law to provide evidence-based treatment, offer you evidence-based treatment for your difficulties. That's if you are in a federal prison. Think about this. That doesn't happen in K through 12. You can go all the way from kindergarten to the 12th grade and never get an academic assessment. And this is what happens. They see the behaviors through, they get in trouble, they get suspended, which increases their likelihood of contact with law enforcement or the criminal justice system. And then when they're in the system, we say, oh, okay, let's see if there's a problem with you in learning. That's backwards. There are policies in place that make it difficult for kids that have these difficulties to excel in school. We've had zero tolerance policies where if you make one mistake, you're pushed out. And once you're suspended one time, by the 7th grade, your chances of contact with the criminal justice system increases by 75% through one suspension. And it's statistically proven that, especially with black and brown girls, they are 7 times more likely to be suspended 2 times or more.
Oh,
And
okay.
suspensions for black and brown children are 4 times higher than their white counterparts. And when you start looking at 76% of educators are white females, there's a disconnect. There's
Uh,
nobody in there that looks like me. There's nobody in there. And for me, I feel that peace. One man's obedience is another man's destiny.
come
My
on.
constant entrance into school systems, children see there's somebody that looks like me. There's somebody that has a heart like me. There's somebody that experienced the things that I experienced like me. And I can do what he does. That's my biggest impact. I was at a school yesterday doing college and career readiness. And a young lady came up to me and she was like, I never thought I'd see somebody, because it's in a rural area and it's, 4% minority. And she said, I never thought I'd see somebody that looked like me, that has the same experience that I did, make it. She said, I do harder in school. She was able to self-assess just by seeing somebody that looked like her in the room. And that took 30 minutes. I was only there for 30 minutes. She came up, she said, I need to do better. But I didn't know that somebody from my background was able to do better. And that's the important part that I think I play. That's the most important part I play, is that there's somebody that looks like me that's an educator, be a teacher. I can be an educator. I can make money through whatever gifts I have and provide a life, and I can make an impact.
Wow. Wow, brother. I'm gonna say that, right? Because you are my brother, man. I promise you. This is powerful, guys. Listen, put some flames in the chat if you can understand what this brother just put forth, right? If it impacts you, if you've been impacted by it, if you've seen it, if you've touched it, if you've come across it outside of a movie theater, if you've seen it in real life. There's so much that you said there. Good morning, Jasmine. Good morning, Deborah. Kimmy, good morning. Listen, if you're just tuning in, we have Leonard Chello Webb, who is a corrections expert with 27 years of experience and an educator in the present moment, right? And what his purpose is to stem the flow of black and brown bodies from one system into another. And it's so interesting what you said, Leonard, because I'm teaching a speaking training now, right? Called Speaking Like a Leader. And I just did a session. We're in the second week, and I did a session last week where I was talking about the expertise part and how to be an effective communicator and to be a master of your domain and what we call a SME, right? A subject matter expert. For you to exist in that space, you have to know your data. You have to know your math, your data sets, your statistics and analytics. And what I heard you say was a couple facts and a couple figures that are statistical, evidence-based, and can't be refuted by opinion, right? Because there's a lot of people with a lot of opinion, and they say things like, oh, that was in the past, or oh, it's not that bad, or oh, it's not as bad as you make it appear to be. So I want to revisit the statistical part of it, and I'd like to ask you to reiterate those numbers, those facts, and those figures for people who only heard it the first time subconsciously. I want them to pay attention consciously and hear the numbers from you. Could you repeat some of those numbers again, please, sir?
Black and brown girls are 7 times more likely to be suspended 2 or more times than their white counterparts. If you're suspended 1 time by the 7th grade, you're 80% more likely to have contact with the criminal justice system. My my focus has been this year on black and brown girls, because a lot of focus is on black and brown boys, when our black and brown girls are typically the most harshly disciplined, the most frequently disciplined. And I put that focus because I think they're forgotten about. We have laws in place right now that just got enacted for hair in the workplace, for black and brown women to naturally wear their hair and that not be held against them. We don't have that in schools.
Ooh.
Our young ladies that are in the school system are, again, another statistic, are 86% have an 86% chance to have a negative interaction with an educator based on their hair. Just their hair.
Just the hair. Before anything else comes into play, just the hair in the morning, right?
Just the hair.
Now what you're saying brings a couple things to my mind. Okay, so I'm going to give you two recent, I think they were viral posts that I've seen. You know, we're the king of branding, right? So we're always on Facebook. You know, I'm always watching what we call business media. But on these business media interactions, which everyone else calls social media, there's a couple things that stick out. So one thing was a young black girl in school, hair kind of crazy. Like mom started to do the braids, but then didn't complete. And the educator, another black woman, was talking about how the girl's self-esteem was a little low, how she acted out a little bit in the classroom, and how, she was a little rowdy, rambunctious, and anti, let's just say that, anti, right? But then what the woman did was brought a comb to school. This educator now, as a teacher, what she did was she brought a comb to school, and the next day when the children went out to lunch, she did the young girl's hair and said that her attitude completely transitioned and she was a new person, not just because her hair was done, but because her hair was done by a school official, right? Someone that she could relate to, someone the same complexion as her parent, her mother, right? So that's one thing. Another one that I saw was a young boy kicking down what looked like his grandmother, right? A couple times, 2 or 3 times, like kicking her hard down, right? And it was stated about how the youth are losing the respect for the elderly and any kind of authority form. Now, this child couldn't have been 14, 15. He was right there, younger than that. But his affect was very imposing and very aggressive, very antisocial, anti-authoritative. So when I give you those examples, is that the kind of example that you're seeing inside of the school, kind of being prepped for a bad situation with the criminal justice system? Is that a representation of that?
The focus in most schools is what is happening and not why it's happening. And I try and get educators to understand why something is happening, not to justify the behavior, but to understand it. That why makes the biggest difference. And I'll give you a personal example. I was in a school and this young man has beautiful hair. His hair was just beautiful. His strength was in his locks, as they say.
Okay,
and he comes to school and he has a hood on. And the teacher in the room is, take your hood off. And he's upset. And he takes his hood off and his head is shaven. So I pull him out the classroom and I say, I know you admire me and look up to me, but you didn't have to shave your head for that. I said, what happened? And he smiled. And then he went on to tell me that his older brother got in trouble and his mom shaved his head. So he didn't want his older brother to be the only bald one in the house. So he shaved his own head in a show of solidarity to his brother. And he got picked on the bus to school, so he put his hood up so they'd stop picking on him about his bald head. He walks into the classroom, and instead of the teacher trying to find out the why this is going on, the meaning behind the behavior, they just went straight to discipline. There's too much policing in our schools. There's too much policing of our culture in our schools. Hair, the attitudes, the behaviors, how we respond to things. We just respond to things differently. And I try and bridge the gap for the educators and their cultural awareness and understanding the relevance, the braids, like the one you shared. There's a relevance to the braids that you just don't understand. And when you start to figure out why something is happening, you build that bridge. And I like to use the term building a bridge because I want to build the bridge between the school system and the child, so the child has a bridge to a future that doesn't include contact with law enforcement.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your service, brother. It sounds to me like you're on the front line, right? That's what it sounds like to me. It sounds to me like you're on the front line of two different things, right? So I think of the Army, I think of military, I think of combat. And a lot of times when two people are going against each other, we know what's going on with Ukraine and Russia. We know what's going on in different places with different nationalities and different spaces and different geographical regions. A lot of times when people go to war, it's not the people that are really going to war, or it's the people that are representing the combating ideas, the conflict of ideology. And that's why people mobilize against one another, because it's the ideology. So I see you kind of as being on the front line of an ideological conflict, one ideology against another. And then another thing that I said, because a lot of my work is done with high-level entrepreneurs, high-level leaders, high-level individuals, whether it's HR management, whether it's the nursing sector right now. The nursing sector is under the microscope, and they're on the front line of the biological and the especially COVID, but more than that, the health and wellness industry. It related, as soon as you said it, it drew the intersection for me, because I'm always thinking of how to relate one industry to another. And what you said was the why, and you said the reactionary. So people are reacting to a situation instead of being responsive and inquisitive to find out the cause. And what I see, as well as what you said, so that's one industry, which is educational. We have another system, the medical, which does the same thing. They don't really move into the why or the cause or preventative medicine. Rather than that, it's like the money is made on the back end with curative, or not even curative, but treatment, as opposed to prevention. And that goes into a lot of different sectors. Sectors, especially in our neighborhoods. It's what happens after? How do we make money on the back end? How do we highlight the problems, right? So you turn on the news and it's this bad effect, this bad situation. We turn on the news real quick because we're in a different geographical region, just to see what the weather was going to be like, and one bad situation after the next. And it was all black and brown, right? So that's kind of the image that is put forth or spewed at us consistently to reinforce the negative stereotype. And like you said, there's no investigation or inquiry into the cause. And that's very interesting, because in other areas, zip codes, and with other demographics, when something completely tragic takes place, huge proportions of violence or antisocial behavior takes place, the first inquiry that takes place is, oh, there must have been a mental health issue, or family issues, or There's a different perspective, is what I'm saying. There's a different perspective and a different lens shown towards different demographics based on the same cause. Based on the same cause, but there's concern and consideration afforded one, and then there's punishment and penalization afforded the other. And I want to go, when we come back, because I want to take a break on that, I want that to set in. I want the people viewing to set in. Listen, if you're a parent, if you have children, you are a child yourself, no matter how old you may be. That's why I always say I'm just a kid from Harlem, because that's my upbringing, right? And we learn and we internalize what we learn as we move forward. So a lot of your morals, values, principles, and habits and characteristics that you have now as an adult, you picked up and you learned as a child. And a lot of that we carry with us. So I want you to think about what Mr. Webb just said, what Leonard Chello just said about the prevention and the need for prevention, because if we treated the cause, there would be no need for restoration. There would be no need for restoration. So when we come back, we're going to talk about the part that you said when they started seeing your face and what that meant for them when we talk about changing the face of leadership. Mr. B, go ahead, take us to a break. Thank you, sir. All right. All right. So we're back with Leonard Chello Webb, right? We're back with Leonard Chello Webb, and we're talking about stemming the flow of Black and brown bodies from one system to the next, from what's supposed to be educational and preparatory to prison. And he exists at the intersection of the bridge or the pipeline that everybody's been talking about, the pipeline from school to prison. Now, it's interesting because during the break, I was speaking with someone who said that, we're grown now, and we are, right? So you can't say that, the things that you do are based on, as a man or as a woman, the things that you do are based on a situation that you went through when you were young. It's hard to say that. You can't really, it's hard to justify that. And I agree with that. However, a child's mistake becomes an adult's marginalization. A child's mistake, a mistake you make at 13, a mistake you make at, like Leonard Chello's talking about, before the 7th grade, penalizes you in your adult process. And it does. It's held against you in every court of public opinion. Tell us about the school record and how the school record follows or is attached to an adult's job application. Does that even exist?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You understand that your high school diploma, your high school background,
Yeah.
only resume you have. It's only the only proof that you have for your job applications when you're that young. And I just want to say something about, you being a kid from Harlem.
Yeah.
The- being a child at heart is your most gangster and spiritual characteristic.
Oh man. Thank you, brother.
I just wanted to say that. It was on my mind, and I wanted to get it out before I forgot.
Thank you. Thank
But
you.
when you think about this, when a child is labeled trouble in kindergarten, that follows them. Teachers talk. When a child has an older sibling that's been in trouble, teachers talk. Oh, that's Leonard Webb's younger brother. He's going to be trouble before they even enter the classroom. So now they have a label which affects their relationships with other teachers, because other teachers are predisposed that this child is going to be bad. So when the child does anything, no matter how minor it is, the punishment is increased because the expectation is it's going to get worse if you don't do something about it now. And that's where the disproportionality, a lot of it comes from. It comes from the labels that follow the child from as early as elementary school. They're suspending kids in preschool. So
Are you
when you're
serious?
suspended in preschool, what kind of chance do you have to have a good relationships with teachers when teachers are already telling other teachers that you're a bad kid?
Wow. You said you're being suspended in preschool. Guys, if you're watching this, right? Let me just, if you're watching this and you have experienced anything, what are your thoughts? I don't see a lot of activity in the chat. Now, maybe I'm not looking at the right chat. I'd like to know how the viewers feel about what Mr. Webb is bringing to light this morning during Breakfast with the Brand. Is it real? Have you experienced it? Do you experience it with your children? And what are your expectations? What are your expectations, and or what are we being groomed for or set up for, as the case may be? Sometimes I come from a place where they say certain things like the deck is stacked against you. The odds are against you. There's a bigger chance for you to be unsuccessful than successful. Right? So we've got, put up Mr. B, put up Jasmine's comment about being bullied. So Jasmine is a nurse leader, right? And she says, I used to get bullied by students and teachers over my hair. That's powerful. So that gives a little bit of evidence and credence to what you're talking about. And Jasmine is older than 20. Let me say that, right? Bring up the last comment she just made, Mr. B. Now, I'm not going to talk to, she said all white schools. Now, bring up the comment she just made after that, Mr. B. Watch this. I asked my sisters to make my hair normal.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. So here we're compromising identity. What we're doing here is we're compromising identity because there's overwhelming powers that say you're not good enough, or your expression. Listen, guys, in a climate of DEI, in a climate of diversity, equity, and inclusion in business, schools are missing the boat. Schools are missing the boat because these are children. So they don't have the representation. They're not leaders yet, but they're the generation of our next leaders. And if we call them CULL, if we call them and we stem the flow of their ideas and their culture and their expressions and individuality and inclusivity, if we stem that flow from school to business and from school to leadership, and instead we misdirect that or redirect that to where Leonard Chello Webb comes from with his experience, then our leadership is always going to be over representative of that which is not familiar. Which brings me to, or let me say, not just familiar, but not familiar and not compassionate. Because there's a emotional disconnect. There's an emotional disconnect. So what I want to say is the part about changing the face of leadership. So the reason why I said I wanted to change the face of leadership and for it to become more representative of our culture or experience is so for the same reason that you just said, Cello. Now, I've spoken in prisons, I've spoken in schools, and when I do, I always say, I'm just a kid from Harlem who. That's why I start the way I started. I'm just a kid from Harlem who. So the kids from Harlem, the kids from Brooklyn, the kids from the inner cities, the kids from Atlanta can see a representation of themselves, clean cut, still young, still with a little bit of, body language representative of where they come from, right? And then be able to say, make the connection, like you said, make the bridge between where they are to where they can possibly become. Right. And I remember you saying that when that young person, that young girl, you said, saw you, she was able to make a connection to a different possibility. And I think that possibility, because when I was young, it was either the corner, it was the corner, it was the microphone or the basketball. That was it. The corner, the microphone, and the basketball. And I'm what, 5'10", right? So Duncan probably wasn't my thing, right? The other Webb does that, right? Spud Webb, that wasn't my thing, right? So, and the microphone, I did that for a little while, but the corner had the majority appeal. And that's kind of what takes place because our educators are not representative of our population. We don't have that example. I understand what that young lady was saying when she said, I've never seen one, because in my situation, I never saw one. And if I did see one, they were very overly compensating on the punishment end, right? So you might see one, but they're worse than the other ones. You understand? So it's interesting how that plays out. And, your presence, because I know you don't need to. That's one thing that I know, because if you go through 27 years of something and you retire from something, then you're well taken care of, you're well compensated. So I know that what you do comes from your heart. And I appreciate that because our populations, our schools need it. And that's why it was so important for me after watching your work for years and years and years for me to see the authenticity and the permanence of your purpose, right? So I think we're going to bring you back on for another segment next week after people get to digest this one. I want people to get to digest this one and really let it set in and understand why it's so important that we create businesses, why it's so important that we create brands that build platforms so that you can speak to a bigger thing. When I say we're building the brand and I went from crickets to digits and all of that, that's true, but there's a bigger reason. There's a bigger reason why we do the leadership leverage. There's a bigger calling to leverage your leadership. There's a reason why I use the word leverage. There's a reason why I do it. And I hope that this segment and next week's segment with this gentleman, Leonard Chello Webb, and the topic that we're discussing really kind of evidences that and speaks to that. Mr. B, bring up Deborah's comment, the last comment she made before we go into the closing statements. Deborah says, I remember wanting straight hair at an early age because my hair was too bushy. Now bring up the last statement that Amal stated. She says, my kids went through that. Bring up the statement before that Amal made. Having a different culture or different language is fought and labeled not normal and needs to change to be Americanized. There's someone else here under her comment, Facebook user. Could you bring that up? I started homeschooling after my daughter completed kindergarten. There's a couple different movements taking place. There's a couple different campaigns. I'll use marketing terms, right? There's a couple different campaigns being presented and aggressively fought while everything else is taking place. Leonard Chello Webb, I'm going to give you the opportunity to go ahead and close out this segment, and we'll be back next week. But go ahead, just tell people like your desire to serve, knowing that you don't need to, knowing it ain't got nothing to do with the money, because I know there's no huge compensation. They don't pay you enough. They'll never pay you enough for the work that you do. So why do you still do it? And bring him up. Take me out of here. Let him close out this segment, Mr. B. Thank you very much, sir.
Well, I just want to say right now, I'm actually sitting on federal prison property because I'm building a program with men that are locked up so they can speak when they go back to their communities. Because what I've learned is that what keeps guys from coming back to prison is having a purpose and having a why. And I'm trying to provide that by giving them a platform so they can tell their story, because most, if not all, want to repair some of the damage that they've done to their communities and their families. So when I jump off of here, I'm going right in, digging in with them so I can help them build something. I haven't forgotten about, my brothers that are incarcerated, and I still don't want them coming back to prison. And I just want to speak to the young lady that put something in the chat about her hair and it being normal. And that's part of what happens, is that it's not seen as normal. You have to deny your culture in order to survive. And what happens after you leave school is that they use different code words. It's not professional. It's it's unprofessional to have hair like that. And my biggest thing is to empower parents and their children to understand, one, their rights when they're in school, so they can challenge some of the things. And you don't have to be an expert. All you have to do is ask why. And I challenge educators to look at their own implicit biases so they can take a risk and be what our Black and brown children need to excel at schools. It'll be a pleasure to come back, talk about. My risk is actually an analogy when I tell educators to take a risk, and I'll share this with you real quick. It's real relationships, intentional actions, safe spaces, and keep asking questions. And I can delve deeper into that. Thanks for having me. Touch my heart. I love what you're doing. And don't forget, education is a social justice issue.